Okay, now by this point, you've read through the material about introducing this concept of sentence combining. You've done the online exercise. I hope you kept your paper someplace to compare with what I've done. Now let's talk through those sentences that we put together and some of the reasons that they did what they did. The first set, Maxwell Bratt, the teacher's pet. Don't you love the name? Here's what you had. Maxwell Bratt was not well liked. He was the teacher's pet. All of it goes into sentence A. Maxwell Bratt, the teacher's pet, was not well liked. All of it goes into sentence B. The teacher's pet, Maxwell Bratt, was not well liked. And one thing you noticed is that structurally those two are identical. The only thing that happened was that Maxwell Bratt and teacher's pet traded places. C is a little different. It works very differently. Because he was the teacher's pet, Maxwell Bratt was not well liked. Notice the commas. The thing in there, the teacher's pet in A, Maxwell Bratt in B, those are what I call renaming phrases. They're parenthetical. We could take Maxwell Bratt out of sentence B and it would not tell a lie. It just gives a little less information, that's all. They are technically, so it's called appositive phrases, giving a little more information. And both of those commas are necessary, both at the front and at the back. Sentence C is quite different. It's got a subordinate clause to start the sentence off, and then a comma, and then the main event. The subordinate clause, the reason it's a subordinate clause is the word because. If we take off the word because, he was the teacher's pet, could stand alone as a sentence, but with it on there, it's a subordinate clause and we need that comma. And by the way, that comma after teacher's pet, that's one of the commonest, one of the most normal errors that people make, to leave that out. It's got to be there. By the way, please don't put a comma after the subordinating word. It's a very common error, but it really breaks things up. Here's a rule you can depend on. You can take this to the bank. Use commas to give the reader some idea how to separate things and what belongs together. The stuff that belongs together is because he was the teacher's pet, and then there's another group that belongs together. Maxwell Bratt was not well liked. We don't have three groups here. We don't have the group of because, the group of the teacher's pet, and the group of not well liked. Only two groups. Here comes the second set. He was a kid. The kid thought he knew it all. Sentence A. He was a kid who thought he knew it all. Sentence B. He was the know-it-all kid, or so he thought. Sentence C. His opinion of himself was that he knew it all. One thing you're noticing here, a little difference in language level, a little difference in formality. I want to say a word about hyphens and dashes. Dashes and hyphens. The little ones between the words know-it-all, I've used those to string three little words together and treat them as if they are one word. Know-it-all is now an adjective modifying kid. It's all one word grammatically. The dash, the big one, very different. It works something like parentheses. Parentheses tend to whisper. The dash tends to yell, and it tends to be a little more informal. If you're going to use a dash, you use it to drop a new idea into a sentence, and please type it correctly. Hit that hyphen key twice if you want the big long one. Most word processors will fix it and turn it into the long one. If you have one that doesn't, that would be quite unusual, but if you have one that doesn't, readers understand that two hyphens together means a dash. Now a word about that little word that. The little sentence on the end, he knew it all. That could be a sentence by itself, but we use that word that to turn it into something that can be the direct object. In this case, it's the direct object of was. We sometimes leave it out when we speak. A comma doesn't do the same thing. A comma does not say join together a sentence and another sentence. A comma is a separator. Um, when we speak, sometimes we do it informally this way, and the comma, people who write it this way are trying to reproduce the rhythms of speech. Maybe put a little pause and a sigh in there. His opinion of himself was, he knew it all. Well, for one thing, commas are not breathing marks, at least not in writing. A comma doesn't join things, a comma separates things. You need something else. You need the word that. Technically, this thing is called a complementizer. Here comes the third set. The teacher would ask questions. Maxwell always had the right answers. Filling in the blanks. The teacher would ask questions, and Maxwell always had the right answers. When the teacher would ask questions, Maxwell always had the right answers. Maxwell always had the right answers for the teacher's questions. Pausing and looking at those three very, very different structures. A is balanced sentence, independent clause, and independent clause. B is a subordinate clause kind of construction. Subordinate clause when, and then the main event after the comma, the independent clause. And then finally C, just a kind of a complex independent clause all by itself. Thinking about that would, part of a two-word verb. It's saying something more than just it happened in the past. It was like habitual. This is the commonplace thing. You would see this day after day. The teacher would do this, and the teacher would do this, and the teacher would do this. That two-word verb pairs up nicely with the. It's not a two-word verb, but it's an adverb and a verb. Always had, always had, always had. We're talking about something that went on all the time in the past. We've got at least 5 ways to talk about the past in English, and they say different things. When you get used to the subtlety of this, you have a lot of power in your writing. Plain old simple asked. We don't know much except it happened before now. Okay, so now is 5 o'clock, and whatever happened, the asking, it could have been 4:59 and 59 seconds. The would ask, that leans on the idea that it happened a lot. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't just a snapshot thing. It happened again and again and again. Used to ask, that's a little different. It happened all the time. It was a habit, but it doesn't happen anymore. Has asked, that could be right up to 4:59:59. It's really, really recent. Had asked, that's leaning on the point that it was a while back and it took place a little further back than just recent history. It was a while ago. Here comes the fourth set. Tests would be given. He always scored at the top. Tests would, and here comes the write out. Tests would be given, and he always scored at the top. Another balanced sentence, comma, and. When tests would be given, he always scored at the top. Another subordinate clause opening it up, comma, and then the main event. He always scored at the top of tests that would be given. And once again, you see that would be, that was the habit, that was the normal thing. I want to say a word about the coordinating conjunctions, comma, and. We have 7 of these things that can join 2 independent clauses together. I can never remember them all, the 7 in that vertical column. If you look at the first letter of each 7, it spells out the word fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And these always need a comma before them. They say a lot more than just this happened, comma, this happened. So here are the 7 in action on the right. Bilbo was a hero for he killed the dragon. Sort of a cause-effect thing going there. Number 2, we are in love and we will get married. That says the least of all of these. It just says two things are happening. She is not pretty, nor is she well liked. We got one negative thing, and here's yet another negative thing. I am small, but I am strong. You didn't expect the strong part. The but says here comes something that's a bit of a surprise. I will win this battle or I will die trying. Two alternative possibilities present themselves with or. 6, I am small, yet I can lift this. A little, a little subtle difference between 4 and 6. Number 7, we are in love, so we will get married. There's a cause effect going. So with those simple little words, you can say a lot more than just this, this. By the way, here's what I call the dear but rule. Please don't go to the writing center and ask them to explain the dear but rule. I made up this name myself. They will think I'm insane. But the dear but rule goes like this. The comma always goes before the coordinating conjunction. And I got that name from this sentence that one of my students wrote. I like to hunt deer, but my father likes to fish. Don't put it after, please. What the comma is doing is showing you what groups belong together. So in the first one group is I like to hunt deer, another group is but my father likes to fish. These are not the groups. I like to hunt deer, but my father likes to fish. Saying a little bit more. Beginning with that dependent or subordinate clause, same idea, two different names for the same creature. This isn't a run-on sentence because of that word when. That's what turns that into a subordinate clause. Subordinate clause, comma, independent clause, that's not a run-on. Got to have that comma. That is a very common error in many writers is to forget to put that in. We could have written this third one differently. He always scored at the top of the class when tests would be given. And in this case, that when tests would be given, that's another subordinate clause. It's at the back side of the sentence, not the front. And just one of the things about the way we write, we don't put the comma when the subordinate clause is at the back. It's always at the beginning, not very often at the end. Well, here we are at the end of yet another one, and